Hi everyone, welcome back to a brand new video on my channel. Today I'm going to be rounding up my whole experience as a Google apprentice, and I'm going to take you through what I think are the pros and the cons. Obviously all the views are my own personal views. It's all just my opinion and how I found my personal experience. Apprenticeships are very situational depending on who you work with, what team you put in, what qualification you're doing. So yeah, just keep in mind this is my word only. Someone's experience might be completely different to mine, so take it with a pinch of salt, I guess. So as of 2 weeks ago when I'm filming this, probably more when this video goes out, I completed my level 3 digital marketing apprenticeship qualification at the company Google, and I was based in London pre-COVID times, but obviously majority of my apprenticeship has been virtual. A bit of context to my story: I chose this apprenticeship as an alternative to university. I was going to study business management and marketing, but just for various reasons which I won't go too much detail into, I was struggling to commit 3 years to a degree because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I didn't feel that excited about going to university, and also I thought the course would be quite outdated, so that's kind of why I went for a digital marketing course as well, because obviously it's a lot more online focused, social media, paid campaigns and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna go through the pros of my apprenticeship first and then move on to what I see as the cons, maybe just like the limitations. I don't think there's anything necessarily too bad about an apprenticeship, but there's obviously considerations for certain types of people and things like that, so I'm just going to flag them up at the end as well. But starting on a good note, the first and probably biggest thing that I love about the apprenticeship is just the people that I've got to meet. I've built so many genuine connections with people that I wouldn't necessarily have had the opportunity to meet. Being from Leicester, obviously I moved to London, I met loads of other people outside of work as well. Not even people that I worked with, but people within the company. I remember our apprenticeship manager put on these sessions where we'd speak to the directors of a lot of different teams around marketing and sales. So directors are like really senior people within the company. And there was one session where, and it was funny because there was nothing in his like summary or biography in the caption, because they'd kind of like summarize who this person was before you were going to meet them, so you could maybe think of questions and kind of just get a feel for the session. There was this one guy that was a manager for like an internal team, and he it was crazy. He was the founder of Innocent Smoothies. Like, we were all just sat there like, wait, what? What? You founded Innocent Smoothies? Obviously he wasn't, I don't think he was the only one. He was like a co-founder, but it was just mad. Like, I've spoken to the founder of Innocent Smoothies. Like, to say that, it's just crazy, and you never know who you're going to meet in big companies like that. So definitely a big plus. London is like a bubble. The types of industries there, the big companies, like we have nothing like it here in Leicester. And I'm sure if you live in similar cities or like in the Midlands area, you know, there's not much going on. So yeah, London was a great experience for me, and I would do the apprenticeship all over again just to meet all the people and like spend more time with them. And I learnt the most from the people, although I studied and did a qualification and obviously had loads of coursework. The things I learnt the most, which might have been stemmed from the qualification, but it was cemented by the people and the practical work that I was doing. So yeah, huge part of my experience. And I just think as a 19-year-old, or I went in as an 18-year-old, you know, if you were going to go to university, you just wouldn't be able to build the same connections. You might be able to reach out to the same sort of people, but you wouldn't have that same connection or relationship as if you would work with them or, you know them in the same company and stuff like that, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's a massive benefit. And obviously I think that depends what company you're in as well. So obviously bigger firms, often people have more connections, have been to other bigger firms, whereas if you're in a smaller company, they might have just worked there, or their connections might be limited. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm just saying it's all situational. Another pro is just the fact that I've developed so much personally. Obviously there's a lot of professional development going on, which I'll go into, but just as a person, I've come in as one person and come out of this apprenticeship as another. I have so much more self-confidence, and I've been through a lot as well, you know, everyone has, with COVID and having to move back home with my family, just a virtual life, and, you know, having those people, being able to still work and still having a job in these times has been obviously a benefit, but also just an interesting time to navigate, you know, how to carry on. And it's been amazing to have the support of the people around me, and yeah, it's just really helped me develop personally. And the confidence I have of walking up to people or introducing myself, I know how to introduce myself, I know how to hold a conversation, I know how to have intentional conversations. A lot of it is about communication. I just feel a lot more confident in that area, and I think that's a massive area of self-development. I've also just understood my priorities. I know what I think is important, what I like doing, the types of people I want to be surrounded by. Moving out to London gave me the opportunity to learn how to save, and also coming back home, actually, obviously I've saved a lot more whilst being at home, but being in London helped me budget and understand basically how much things cost. I've had a lot of achievements over the past year, and along with that comes imposter syndrome, so knowing how to deal with, you know, having big achievements and actually shout about them, because sometimes it's just so hard to talk about what you've done well with other people, and you're really encouraged to do that throughout the apprenticeship. So that's been a great area that I've managed to improve and develop. Now, moving on to professionally, obviously you're in a professional environment. Okay, some woman's just stopped outside my house and is staring in my window. She's just staring at the car. Okay, dog's following her. I think her dog's just weed on our front garden. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. Sorry, I'm sat in front of a window. What was I saying? Yes, developed professionally. Obviously, you're in a professional environment. You're in the workplace. So going in as an 18-year-old, and I was surrounded, most of my team were like 30s, mid-30s, nearly 40s. So they were quite mature, obviously, lots of work experience. So you just mature really quickly, and I found myself quite a mature person anyway. I get along with the people older than me, and a lot of my friends, I'd say, are quite mature. And yeah, I just thrived in that environment, I think. Like, I really loved it, and just this opportunity to learn from all these people was amazing. And it's just silly things as well, like, well, not silly, but it's just little things, saying, you know, knowing what questions to ask while networking, or just what questions are appropriate within meetings and things like that. And also just getting used to the workplace with a group of apprentices is great, because a lot of the intake, some of them were a bit older, some of them had work experience, but quite a few of us came straight out of school, like my position, so straight out of A-levels. And it was great to just figure out this working world together, and we could have conversations like, oh my gosh, I learned what this word meant today, or this happened in my meeting, and, you know, I took responsibility of this. Are you getting the same sort of responsibility in your team? You can kind of just, in a good way, compare each other's situations and help each other through that time as well, so you don't feel so alone and so overwhelmed. And then this is specifically for kind of the landscape I was placed in with a digital marketing qualification as well. I had a lot of exposure to the advertising landscape and media landscape, so we'd talk a lot about different channels, so TV advertising, online advertising, video advertising, search advertising, and then we'd also talk about different components like budgets, creative. So yeah, I was exposed to a lot of these different conversations and different topics, and to kind of keep up to date with all that is a great experience. So to be in that environment for over a year, and see all these changes happening, especially through COVID, is so interesting to see what changes, how brands react, and also what people think of stuff. So an article would come out, for example, and it'd be dropped in the group chat like, what did everyone think of this? And everyone would just share their thoughts, and it's so interesting to see how people think and how people react to things, and what's classed as good, what's classed as not. And I'm talking about more like the human side of it, so obviously you can learn the theory of what makes a good advert, but I learned way more from just people kind of discussing things and trying to work things out, find problems and gaps and solutions and things like that. So I hope that makes sense of just being able to understand how the advertising landscape works, because there's a lot of different components, and if you are in the marketing world, you'll know about agencies. I'd never heard of an agency before, and it's actually where I'm going next. I'm moving to a creative agency. But there'll be these media agencies who discuss the media mix and the budgets, and then there'll be the creative agency that make the adverts and produce them, and then they'll all work together, and Google will sometimes be in the middle of that, and it's just a minefield to figure out when you join, but it's an amazing experience to be wrapped up in all of that and just, you know, be like right in the heart of it. It's so much fun. And again, I feel like I've already said it, but just at such a young age, it's so cool, and I feel like it's just gonna, you know, it's just going to give me so many benefits when I move on in my career and go into my next job and things like that. And lastly, I've put keeping really up to date with what's actually going on in the industry. So I've kind of touched on it, but just to elaborate a bit more, like, you can read as many articles as you like and keep in touch, you know, online that way, but if you have no one to discuss ideas with, I feel like it's very different and you don't get the full picture. So like I said, to see how people react that have been in the advertising world, that have come from all these different backgrounds, so interesting to see what different people think of things. And sometimes you hear stuff internally that you can't necessarily find online, or confidential stuff, you know, like, it's just really interesting to see what brands are doing and how people are acting and reacting to certain situations. So yeah, that was just another elaboration on that, and you won't get the full experience unless you're inside a company. So outside of digital marketing, you know, you can learn as much as you want about law, but until you're in a law firm, you don't really get the full picture. So an apprenticeship is a great way to get exposure to all of that good stuff that you're interested in. Now moving on to the cons, which again are all situational, all just my opinion, but I just wanted to share them because I'm aware that apprenticeships aren't for everyone, and you know, I had an amazing experience, but some of you might not. So I just want to share it. So in case you're considering an apprenticeship, you don't make that jump and it's a mistake. You can kind of figure out whether it's the right route for you before making that big risk. So my first one is not doing an apprenticeship with a large intake might be quite isolating, especially in these virtual times. So there was 23 apprentices taken on in my cohort, and obviously Google and most likely big companies usually take on a big intake, whereas smaller companies will only take a few apprentices or maybe even just one. But I was actually speaking to a friend that works at GSK, and she's the only HR apprentice, and she's joined virtually. Luckily there's a lot of initiatives over there and she's very happy, but I can just imagine a lot of the struggles that I've been through, and like I mentioned earlier, it's great to get used to the working world with a group of young people that are in the same position as you. If I didn't have that, I think I would have struggled a lot. And although I had a mentor and a manager and a really supportive team, if you don't have those people that are in similar situations that can really relate to you and that grew up the same way, well, not the same way that you did, but with the same surroundings almost, you know, it's really hard to connect with people on that level if you don't have those people there. And also just for social stuff, so I moved in with 6 other apprentices. We used to go on nights out all the time, and I've made genuine friends, and I think that's why I don't feel like I missed out on the university experience, because I moved out of home, I moved in with friends, I, you know, still went and socialised and went on nights out and stuff like that. We've had a lot of funny memories together. Seeing my friends at university, it is a little bit different, but I feel like I've had the best of both worlds, because it's not only been an apprenticeship, but I've also had this social side that I managed to do. So for those of you that think you might struggle virtually, like, you just really need to consider, will you be able to do an apprenticeship stuck in your 4 walls? I don't think you can rely on, oh, but you know, when I start, COVID will be over, because we just don't know. And there's all these talks of offices reopening, but no one has any idea. But I guess it is a great way to kind of fill your time, even if you're not sure about university, because that's in a really weird place at the minute as well. If you're not doing a degree apprenticeship, like me, mine was only 15 months. So that could just be kind of, I don't want to say a time killer, because it's like it's not valuable, but just to kind of figure out what you want to do, so that time in between doing nothing isn't wasted. But yeah, I just think that's a really big point to make. So I think I would have been very lonely if I was the only apprentice in the company or on my course. Another big one about people, considering as people made a huge impact on my experience, I think this is where a lot of the bads and cons can come from. If you don't get on with your mentor, I think it could impact your experience massively. My mentor was great. He taught me so much. He was so supportive, and I always felt comfortable. Like, he created this safe space where I could talk about anything, and You know, if I wasn't happy with the way he was doing something, I was quite comfortable to be quite blunt. That's kind of how I am as a person anyway though, but I was comfortable to be quite blunt and just tell him, like, it doesn't work when we do things this way, can we try and do things this way? And just little things like that. And I just think if you don't have that genuine connection with your mentor, which is very unlikely, I will say, out of 23 apprentices, I don't know many that didn't really enjoy being in their team and that didn't like their mentor, but a mentor is such a huge part of your experience. You're spending every single day with them. A lot of your projects will probably be working with them, and they are the ones that do your constant reviews. So every month we had a meeting with my mentor and my coach from my education provider where we discuss my development, my improvements and what I'd need to work on. And those conversations could be quite awkward if you don't feel comfortable with the people that you're talking to. I think that's a big consideration, but obviously you don't know that until you start your apprenticeship. So I think you've just got to weigh up whether that's a risk worth taking for you personally. And I'm sure there's always like structures around changing that if you really hate your mentor and you're really not getting on. I'm sure that people could switch that around for you, and you know, there'd definitely be support there from the company and your education provider. So I wouldn't worry too much about it because it's something that you can't really control, but it's definitely just something that I wanted to mention. Now, like I said at the start of the video, my qualification was a level 3, which is equivalent to A-levels, so it's not quite a degree apprenticeship, and it was in digital marketing. And this has no reflection on the education provider. They were formerly known as White Hat, they're now called Multiverse. And I really have a lot of good things to say about them. My experience has been only positive with them. But I will say for my curriculum, it didn't stretch me. And I will say I'm quite an academic person, but a lot of the things felt like common sense to me, especially with digital marketing, because a lot of it's social media. We've kind of grown up with that anyway. And the level 3 curriculum, I don't know, I can't speak for the degree apprenticeship because I've not done it, and it might only be for this qualification. I don't want to generalise apprenticeships in saying this because this is only my experience. I did definitely learn new things, and I didn't feel like it was a waste of time because it kind of just connected the dots between what you were doing practically and theoretically. I feel like a degree might have stretched me a bit more, but then that's my choice in doing a level 3 qualification. You know, I can't blame anyone for that, and like I said, I don't want to put that on the education provider because I've only had positive experience with them. I also just want to mention that I only got a pass in my qualification. I did expect a distinction just because I am quite an academic person and I put a lot of effort into my coursework and my portfolio, and a lot of the other apprentices did get distinctions. I got a pass, and after having the feedback, it makes sense, but I felt personally like it was out of my control. So the feedback was that I didn't implement enough things myself. So that would be like setting up a Facebook campaign or a social campaign physically on my laptop. But there was a lot of restrictions within Google that we don't do stuff like that. We always pass it on to like an agency, or there's teams in Dublin that work behind the scenes in Google Analytics and Google Ads. So yeah, there weren't a lot of opportunities for me to explore that area just because of team structures, confidentiality reasons with clients, and I did try and explain that as much as I could, and I did try and stretch myself to get as much implementation experience as possible. And it's just frustrating when you don't feel like you have control over that, and I think that's a problem between the education provider and their expectations and what Google can actually give them. Yeah, maybe that's like a development in the program for the future, but again, I've got my qualification. No one will ask whether I've got a distinction or not. It's not that big of a deal to me. When I first read it, I was annoyed and I was like, okay. The perfectionist in me kind of kicked off a little bit, but after an hour I got over it and I was just like, look, in my personal opinion, I didn't take the apprenticeship to get the qualification. Obviously that was a plus, but it gave me the opportunity to work at Google, and that's why I took it. So I just had to remind myself of that and not get too like aggy about it. But I think that's just like one of the creases within the curriculum that probably needs to be ironed out in the future, or just agreements need to be made between the company and the education provider on that. And then lastly, this point is about apprenticeships in general. I personally think, from what I've seen and speaking to different apprentices, I have quite a wide network with apprentices from loads of different companies. I think having a bigger name on your CV is important. So apprenticeships are great, but I don't think they make you stand out unless you're at a big company. And a lot of my interviews, the question straight away would be, oh my god, what was it like working at Google? Like, what was that experience? Rather than like, oh cool, so you did digital marketing, like tell me more about that. No one was too interested in my qualification. So I think your employability is greater when you're at a bigger company. And I don't want to disregard anyone's qualifications that work at smaller companies. You know, experience is better than none, and I think as long as you can get that experience wherever it is, it's amazing. But from personal experience, from the interviews that I've had and people that I've spoke to around the company and different apprentices at other big companies, I think unfortunately the name does matter. And when you've got a name like Google on your CV under the age of 20, it does make you stand out and it does make people interested. So I would say that's probably a con, because obviously the apprenticeships at bigger companies are really competitive, and oftentimes they only offer them in London or big cities up north like Manchester. So yeah, it is a bit frustrating because it's not as accessible to everyone as we'd probably all like them to be. So I'm hoping with apprenticeships becoming more popular, more opportunities arise for those of you like around the UK and that are struggling to get apprenticeships at big companies, because they are really competitive. And I'd say just from me applying to now, they've become 10 times more competitive. It's so interesting that when I first started making YouTube videos, all my questions would be, oh my gosh, like what do you do? What's this apprenticeship about? Like what is an apprenticeship? What do you actually do at Google? And now my questions are like, how do I stand out in my interview for my apprenticeship? Like tips for the assessment centre, do I need experience? Like give me advice on how to stand out. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, things have really changed in the apprenticeship space. So yeah, again, that's just my opinion, and I just wanted to share it because I think it would be useful to some of you considering apprenticeships. And that is the last thing I wanted to say. So hopefully that's all been useful. Hopefully this video has made sense, because I feel like I've rambled on a lot. But if you have any more questions about certain aspects, like more about social life or how things were virtually maybe, leave them in the comments. I'll always reply to your comments. So definitely ask your questions there. And thank you so much for watching this video. Give it a like if you did find it useful, and subscribe for more content like this.